Mr. Chair, we are live.
Perfect. Thank you, Steph. Good evening, everybody. Sorry for the slight delay there as we were figuring out some technical difficulties. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:06 p.m. on August 28th. Welcome to the Town of Ajax Committee of Adjustments meeting for tonight. This meeting is for the Committee of Adjustments is being held pardon me, in person in Council Chambers at Ajax Town Hall and is also being live streamed for public viewing on the internet pursuant to the Committee of Adjustments terms of reference and meeting procedures. If we encounter any technical difficulties, we may take a brief recess while they are resolved. Thank you for your patience, and we'll now proceed with the meeting. For those of you joining in person this evening, if you haven't already done so, I'd ask you that you complete the sign-in sheet if you wish to speak this evening. And I'd like to now call this meeting to order. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is situated within the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississaugas, more specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaties of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous people. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Before moving on to the application portion of this meeting, I'd like to confirm whether there are any disclosures of interest from members of the committee with today's set forth agenda. Okay, seeing none, then I'll look for a motion to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting. Ken?
I move adoption of the minutes.
Okay, great, thank you. Heard. Seconder? Bernadette? Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, then I'd like to call for a vote. And the vote has been carried. Just from a technical perspective, I don't know if you guys saw that on the voting. Sean? Yeah. Okay. Before we move further into the application, I'll just like to quickly cover off the mandate of the Committee of Adjustments. It derives jurisdiction and authority from the Planning Act. The committee is responsible for considering applications which seek to authorize the following: minor variances from the provisions of the town zoning bylaw, extensions, enlargements, and variations of the legal non-conforming use of any land, building, or structure, permit the use of any land, building, or structure for any purpose that, in the opinion of the committee, conforms with the provisions of the zoning bylaw, where the uses permitted in the zoning bylaw are defined in general terms, consent to sever a new lot from an existing lot, consent to alter the existing boundaries of a lot, such as lot additions, lot line adjustments, consent to register rights of way and easements over land, consent to sell, mortgage, charge, or enter into an agreement for more than 21 years for a portion of land, and validation of land title when there has been a minor error in the description of the land. When considering minor variances, the committee is to assess whether the general intent and purpose of both the Ajax official plan and zoning bylaw are maintained, the proposal is desirable for the appropriate development and or use of the subject land, building, or structure, and the variance is minor in nature. When considering consents, the committee must ensure proposals conform to the Regional of Durham, the Town of Ajax official plan, and have regard to the matters outlined in the Planning Act. In all scenarios, the committee must ensure consistency with the in effect provincial policy statements and conformity within the in effect provincial plans. I'd like to now briefly cover the procedure for tonight's meeting. The applicant and or agent will be called upon and at their option may provide a brief description of the minor variance and or consent application that they have applied for, and that can be done in person or virtually online. The committee members may ask questions of the applicant and or agent, after which anyone with a direct interest in the application, whether for or against, will then be given an opportunity to speak for the application. Once a motion is put forward by a committee member, there will, however, be no further input from the applicant and or agent or anyone having interest in the application. After a decision is made, a notice will be sent out and there will be a 20-day appeal period. The decision of the committee may be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, or the OLT, by the applicant or a specified person of or public body, as outlined in the Planning Act. Please note that third-party appeals, for example, appeals from neighboring landowners or members of the public, are not permitted. The decision will become final and binding if no appeals are received during that 20-day appeal period. If a building permit or other approvals are required, they may be filed during the appeal period. However, please note that no permits or approvals will be issued until the appeal period is completely over and the decision becomes final and binding. A respectful decorum during this evening's proceedings is expected of all present and at all times. Let me now take a moment to introduce you to the committee members presiding over the procedures this evening. Starting from my furthest right, we have Bernadette Santiago. I've got Laurie Roberts, Ken Elliott, Tomas Baca. I'm the chair of the committee, Wasif Ahmed, and to my left is town staff and planning. We've got 4 applications on the agenda today. 2 of them are going to be, I believe, deferrals, and they're later in the agenda. So we'll start with minor variance application A2024. This is for 2 Kingsford Court, and the application is seeking variance from to permit a minimum setback from the front lot line of 4.5 meters, where the minimum setback according to zoning and bylaw requirements is 9 meters, to permit a setback from the west interior lot line of 0.7 meters when the setback from interior solid line is 4.5 meters in the bylaw. Do we have the applicant here for variance application A2024?
Good evening. My name is Shalisa Rajan, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, Shalisa. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So before I hand over the floor to you, I'm just going to look to my staff here just to find out and confirm whether notice was served on this application and whether there were any responses received.
Mr. Chair, notice was served and no responses were received.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Okay, so Shalisa, you've got the committee's attention. If you can perhaps walk us through the project and why you're seeking for the minor variance application for this project.
Can you see my screen? Or Eric, are you able to share your screen?
I believe
We'll give you permission to share your screen. Just 1 second.
Sure.
Just bear with us. Some technical difficulties. 1 second.
If you're just joining us, we're just working through some technical difficulties, so we'll be back on shortly. Just while the team is figuring that out, Shalisa, is there anything else that's audio only that you can perhaps start off with, at least to kick off in terms of the project, just while the presentation part is getting figured out?
Yeah, I can jump in. There's just a couple of photos that I wanted to share that kind of help explain the variances, but I can certainly just jump right in while we're waiting.
Okay.
All right. So good evening, Chair and members of committee. My name is Shaliza Rajan. I'm a planner at Bousfield. Our office is located at 3 Church Street in the city of Toronto. So the variances before you this evening are for the prestige employment area of bylaw 95/2003. There's 3 sites in the area that are owned by TriOvest that have a shared relationship with each other. And in a moment, when I'm able to share my screen, I'll kind of walk you through site A, B, C, and how the 3 of them work together. But overall, the message here, oh, looks like we've got some screen sharing. Overall, the message is here that the owner has been actively engaged with town staff through a minor variance application and site plan application for 2 Keensford Court, which is the site that we're discussing today. The built form and the massing for this site have evolved over time. And we also have conditions for the site that relate to the relationships between the sites. Again, if we have screen sharing I'll be able to.
Yeah, I think we're almost there. So is there something on your end? Yeah, so if you could, I think, there we go. Awesome.
There we go.
We got you.
Okay, so this is where I left off. So what I wanted to show you here today is the site that we're speaking about is in blue here, and TriOvest also owns the site here in pink, 1 Keensford Court, as well as 575 Harwood Avenue, which is in green. So conditions 2 and 3 pertain to the relationship at 1 Keensford Court, 575 Keensford Court, as well as 3 Keensford Court and 675 Harwood Avenue. So in our opinion, and the opinion of town staff, the current design and variances associated with the proposed site plan have improved the overall design and land efficiency of the building and the area. So next we have a couple of photos on the screen. On the left, we have 3 Keensford Court and then 2 Keensford Court to the right. Variance 1 pertains to this particular frontage and the relationship between 3 and 2 Keensford. On the right, we have 2 Keensford Court, 1 Keensford Court, and 575 Keensford Court. And variance 2 pertains to the relationship between these 3 properties. Variance 1 is to reduce the front yard setback to a minimum of 4.5 meters along the Keensford Court frontage. The parent bylaw requirement is 9 meters. As highlighted on the screen, the site frontage along Keensford Court is minimal due to the condition of this being a cul-de-sac, which is unusual for an industrial area. As highlighted on the image on the screen, the 9.0 meter requirement is being met or exceeded along other portions of the frontage. And as noted in the staff report, this setback condition is appropriate and is part of a strong streetscape and pedestrian presence along Keensford Court. Next, we have variance 2. This variance is to reduce the east yard setback from 5.1 to 0.7 meters. The intention of the side yard setback provision in bylaw 95/2003 is to ensure adequate separation distances between buildings. In this case, there is ample separation being provided through the drive aisles as demonstrated before you. As highlighted, the unique circumstance in this instance is that there is an interconnected relationship between the neighboring properties. The shared drive aisle and shared parking area permits circulation around the site, and the setback change will be indistinguishable to an unaware observer of property lines. I'd also like to note that the closest neighboring building is nearly 60 meters away, and that is demonstrated on the diagram as well as on the image here. In summary, we have discussed the planning application with planning staff, and overall this is an optimal use of land compared to previous iterations of the site plan. We have received confirmation from town staff that the variances are agreeable and we're accepting of the conditions in the staff report. I'd also like to thank the staff here tonight for their support and patience with the virtual login for the hybrid format meeting. From a professional planning point of view, we believe that this application is minor in nature and that the proposed variances meet the 4 tests. We recommend approval of the application. Daniel from TriOvest and myself are available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shaliza. And thanks again for bearing with us on the technical side. So let me open it up to my committee members here to see if they have any questions. Lori?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is just more, I don't know if it's to staff or to the applicant. The diagram on our report that was given to us, I guess it's, sorry, I'm just looking to see, figure 3, that circular drive, is there anticipated any issues? I'm assuming there will be a lot of transport, larger vehicles going through. Is there any thoughts that there could be problems with the site, with that size of vehicle, sorry?
Through the chair, we're not expecting any issues. Where the trucks come in and out is at the end of the bulb in that cul-de-sac.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be any like turning issues or anything of that nature.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laurie. Anybody else? Okay, Ken?
In the presentation, there was an indication of the stormwater management pond. So I'm looking at figure 1 that's in the staff report that we were provided. And I wondered, there is vacant land to the south. Is the variance that we're talking about only that red area, or does it affect that red area plus the building to be demolished? It doesn't go any further south. I'm just a little confused with.
Yeah, I
land
can
is-
explain. So the subject property is just the area highlighted in red. So the variances are specific to those lot lines. It's just there's a lot of other talk in the report about 1 Keensford and 575 Keensford, which are the properties directly abutting it into the south, because they're all going to basically be interconnected. But the variances are specific to the red area.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? Tomas?
Through you, Mr. Chair, question to staff probably. Is there any plan to have those 3 parcels consolidated in the future? Will that impact the variance in any way?
Through the chair, there is a plan to merge 1 Keensford and 575 Keensford, the properties to the south of it, but it'd be up to the owner if they'd want to merge this property with those as well. And to my understanding, there isn't an intent to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Yep, go ahead, Laurie.
Sorry, just a technicality. It's 575 Harwood, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Good catch. Shaliza, I know you had, as part of your presentation in the closing part, I think you referred to the staff report. I just want to make sure that I explicitly just get your alignment on the 3 conditions in the staff report. You're okay with
Yes,
that?
we're comfortable with all 3 conditions.
Okay, thank you. All right, if there isn't any other conversation from the committee, then I'll look to see whether there's anybody here to speak either for or against the application, either in person or virtually. Again, we're on application A2024 for 2 Keensford Court. Okay, seeing none, then I'll look for a motion from committee members. I see Bernadette first.
I move that we approve minor variance application A20-24, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report, in that the requested variances are minor in nature, desirable for the appropriate development and use of the property, and finally is in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw.
Okay, motion heard. Seconded by Tomas. Any discussion on the motion as put forth? Okay, seeing none, then I'd like to call for a vote. And the vote has been carried. So Shaliza, if you could let your client know, it'll now be subject to the 20-day appeal period we talked about earlier.
Thank you.
All right, thanks again for being here, and apologize for the technical difficulties earlier. Thank you. All right, we'll now move to the second application. This is minor variance application A2124 for 50 Lincoln Street. And the application is seeking a minor variance to permit a maximum gross floor area of 130 square meters for all accessory buildings and structures, and to permit a maximum accessory building height of 6.1 meters. Eric, can you confirm whether notice was served and whether there was any responses received?
Mr. Chair, notice was served and no responses were received.
Okay, appreciate that. Thank you. And do we have the applicant here to speak for the agent to speak for this application?
Yes. So my name is Gregory Hucker, and I'm the husband of the owner, and I'm here to represent.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Hacker. Are you aware that the committee has in front of it a report prepared by town staff that recommends approval for this application, subject to 3 conditions? I'm not sure whether you can see this on your screen as well, but that the subject variance only apply to the property municipally known as 50 Lincoln Street, and in accordance with the drawings that were submitted as part of the application, that the owner applicant maintain the existing drainage on the property, and that the owner applicant obtain all necessary building permits from the town, and non-compliance to any of this would render the decision null and void. Are you familiar with these, and are you aligned to these conditions?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hacker. So then I'll hand over the floor to you. If you could perhaps walk myself and the committee members through the a little bit about the project and why the minor variance is being sought.
Yes. So the project we are trying to accomplish is to have a second building, a garden suite. Our family are expanding, and
Okay, sorry, Mr. Hacker, I'm just gonna ask you to just pause for a second. We have some people here in attendance, and they're having some audio issues in terms of not being able to hear you. Are you able to speak a little bit louder? Is that possible? I'm going to ask my audio guys here to see if there's anything they can do as well. But if you could speak a little bit louder, is that could that work for you, Mr. Hacker?
this is because we're expanding our family, and we want bigger space, and the garden suite is something that we are very interested in, and you know, we are looking forward to having this project.
Okay. Give me 1 second. Was that any better? Okay. I'll paraphrase at least for now, if I may, and committee members keep me honest if I don't catch something. So I think the applicant was just mentioning the fact that they're putting forth a new structure at 50 Lincoln, and as part of that is mostly because of a growing family. That's
Yes.
that's what we've heard. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hacker. And so as part and parcel of the new structure that you're putting in, so the variance that you have is that the new structure puts you over on the permitted maximum gross floor area. Is that correct?
No, it doesn't. Well, yes. Yes, it does.
It does. Okay, so then that's one of the variances that you're seeking, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second variance that you're seeking is in regards to the accessory building height. So the building height that of your project is going to be 6.1 meters. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and this will be a 2-story building.
Yes.
Okay, and we have, I believe, all the parking for the accessory building is accounted for. So you're not seeking any variances on parking, correct?
Yes.
Okay, because I believe, and staff can correct me, or committee members, I think there was 3, I think is what I read in the report. There was
That is correct.
3 staff parking spots. Okay. All right. So I think that covers the bulk of, I think, the major highlights in terms of what the application is seeking and the variances. So I'll open it up to committee members if they have any questions for Mr. Hacker.
Thank you.
Lori?
Just a question to staff. In the staff report, the design services makes mention to privacy fencing is recommended. Is this something that should be or could be included as a condition?
Through the chair. It's ultimately a civil matter and a private property decision. So, I mean, if the committee sees fit, they could make it a specific condition. but staff did not include it as it's ultimately a property owner's decision.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions from committee? Yep, Ken, go ahead.
I'm rereading the staff report, and I just wanted to make sure that the building is proposed to be used by the family that is occupying the main building. It's not. The building is, the accessory building is intended to be occupied by the family that is occupying the main building, or is it a tenant?
The applicant would have to confirm that. We just treat it as a separate unit, so whether it's family or a different person, doesn't matter to us. Is the parking there?
Thank you.
Mr. Hacker, are you able to answer that question?
Yes, as I mentioned before, that because of a growing family, we are expanding our family and we need more space.
Okay, so it's being confirmed that the unit is for family. But there's nothing, staff, if you can correct me, and I think if I follow the logic of your last question, I'll ask it to be explicit anyway. But there's no, if it's no longer family and it is a tenant, they're not contravening any bylaw or.
Correct. We can't people zone. So a unit is a unit. If it's for family or if it's for someone that's going to be leasing the unit, that's entirely up to the owner.
Okay, thank you, Eric. All right, any other questions from committee members? Bernadette?
Through the chair, I just want to make a point of clarification or confirmation. I note that in the staff report, there is a comment, or I should say, no comments listed under fire and emergency services. I just want to confirm that, considering that there are no comments listed there, is it fair to assume that access to this accessory building, if approved, there would be no limitations to access in the event that there's an emergency?
That is correct. There's sufficient space for access.
Okay.
All right, any other questions from committee members? Ken?
Could I get a clarification on figure 2? That figure 2 is showing that Lincoln Street is to the bottom end. The proposed accessory unit is to the entire rear of the property?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead, Maria.
Through the chair, I just want to confirm that the neighboring properties, I'm going to, based on the staff report and the images provided to us, that the surrounding properties are 2-story homes, is that correct? Or are these bungalows?
There's a mix. There's bungalows and 2 stories on the street. I don't know off the top of my head of what the exact ones are abutting, if they're 2 or 1 story, but the street has a mix.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Yep, Ken, go ahead.
Looking again at figure 1, and I see what is outlined in red, and looking at figure 2, is there going to be a second driveway on this property?
Through the chair, no, there'll still only be 1 driveway. On the site plan in figure 2, that other area you see is a walkway, not a driveway.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Okay. So at this point, then I will look to the public to see if there's anybody here to speak either for or against the application. We're an application A2124 for 50 Lincoln Street. If you are here, absolutely. Just feel free to step up to the podium. I believe the mic is hot, so it should be, or I'm not sure if there's a button there that you need to activate the mic with.
Me?
We can, perfect.
Okay.
If you can just start with giving us your name.
I have a hard understanding here, so.
Okay.
I just want to know, is this going to become another rental unit down the road?
So that can you hear me now? Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So that question was posed earlier, and the answer is that the applicant is expressed that the unit will be for family as the family is growing. However, there is no tenant that tells us that they need to maintain that for family use only. It could be rented out the day it's built. It can be rented out 2 years from now, 20 years from now. There's no limitation on its if the owner decides to rent it out.
Right, because apparently he's renting another place out now where he is formed now. Where he is living now, he's living another rental. Where he's currently living now, he's another rental.
I don't know, and I don't know whether that's relevant.
So, it's, seems to have a history of this, so that's our concern.
Okay, so your concern specifically is whether it's going to be a rental?
Yes, it is.
We don't know. The applicant right now is saying that it is for family.
I know. And another issue is, where are they going to park? Are they going to park on the front lawn like they are now?
Okay, I believe the application, sorry, the staff report actually addressed that. So let me go back to it if staff could help me find it and we can maybe project it on the screen.
Yep, through the chair. If you look at the screen, I'm just going to try to zoom in. There's a requirement for 3 parking spaces. They show the 3 parking spaces in the driveway that encroaches into the rear yard behind the current house. So the existing driveway that they have can accommodate the parking.
It doesn't know. There's always cars on the front lawn.
We're going based on what the drawings show and what we see in terms of what driveways there. They could, what they actually do and park on the grass, we can't speak to, but if you are seeing that, it's not permitted. They have to park in an actual driveway area, so.
You drive by anytime, they're there.
So I'd suggest if it is an issue that you make a complaint to bylaw services.
Yeah.
How will they access this? Oh, sorry.
That's okay, thank you.
How will they access this particular unit? Because it's in the back corner of the lot.
So there's going to be a walkway the length of the unit on the west side.
So if there's an issue with, say, unfortunately, a fire or something like that, how are they going to get there?
They'll have access, the walkway will extend all the way from the front of the property to the unit that's being built.
There's a substantial setback between the actual house and the property line,
there is.
so anyone could walk up there if there was an emergency.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So basically, it's a house, so how come we don't have to have a lot severance for a house?
Because they're not seeking another civic address. They're not trying to sever the lot. So the current legislation, Bill 23 in Ontario that was passed 2 years ago, I believe, November 22, stipulates the fact that homeowners, like yourself, if you're one, if I'm one, we can actually build what they call an ADU, or an additional dwelling unit, right on our own property. You don't have to sever a lot. You don't have to go through any other legal matters. If that second building structure that you're building requires variances because it's not meeting a certain bylaw requirement, like this one isn't for gross floor area, then you actually have to come into a committee like this and actually get a variance that this committee would approve or not, but you have to present your case for it. But it's because of that legislation that allows people to build a second structure on your property without having to sever the lot. Do I have that right, Eric?
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, typically you would see this like maybe in the basement of the main house, and what we'd call like an accessory apartment, but the platform for that has expanded a lot. And a lot of that's coming down from the province to encourage more units. So now homes can have multiple units, and in addition, they can have an actual standalone separate structure that in this case may look like another house, but it's still an additional dwelling unit.
Okay, no problem. Just for the record, for the minutes, do we have these fine folks, their names and stuff?
If you could just write down your name, your address there, your email, that'd be great. Thank you.
Right. And thank you for coming out and asking those questions. Are there any other, Lori?
Just totally in regards to the question that these people were asking, this second dwelling, does it have the same address? Like that, even though there's two buildings on one lot, it's one address for both, correct?
Correct, but they could apply for a separate address. And
Okay.
in fact, and actually with our new bylaw that we're doing for addressing, it's going to be a requirement actually that there's a separate address.
And then would it potentially be an A and B?
I believe so. We haven't sorted that all out
Okay.
yet, and it involves fire and emergency services as well.
Okay.
So we're still looking at those details.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions from committee? And last check, is there anybody else either in virtually or in attendance here to speak for or against the application A2124 for 50 Lincoln Street? Okay, seeing none and hearing none online, then I'll look for a vote, or motion rather. Let me try that again, getting ahead of myself. Lori?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I move that we approve minor variance application A21-24 for 50 Lincoln Avenue Street, subject to the three conditions as outlined in the staff report, based on the fact that it meets the four conditions, is minor in nature, desirable and appropriate for the development and use of the property, and is in keeping with the general intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw and or overriding provincial legislation. And just a small reminder that the design services is recommending a fence.
Okay, just a small clarification. I think you said Lincoln Avenue Street, so I just want to make sure it's 50 Lincoln Street.
Thank you. Yes, 50 Lincoln Street. Sorry.
No, that's
My
okay.
apology.
All right, now can I get a seconder for that motion? I saw Bernadette first. Thank you, Bernadette. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, then I'll look for a vote. And the vote has been carried 4-1. So Mr. Hacker, your application this evening has been approved. It'll now be subject to the 20-day appeal period. Once again, if you have any paperwork to file, you're able to do that. You just will not receive any confirmations until that 20-day period has lapsed. Thank you for attending this
Great.
evening. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is minor variance application A2224. This is for 92 Church Street South. The minor variance that's being sought is to include a personal service shop as an additional permitted use on the ground floor of the existing apartment building. I am being told by staff that this application is going to be deferred to a future meeting, exact timing to be determined later. And just want to raise that by committee to see if anybody has any questions on the deferral before we formally enjoin that with a motion. No? Okay. So can I look for a formal motion on the deferral, please? Ken, I saw you.
I move that we defer application A2224 to a future meeting of the Committee of Adjustment.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Can I get a seconder? Tomas?
Second the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion of deferral? Okay, seeing none, then I'll look for a vote, please. And the vote has been carried unanimously. So the application A2224 for 92 Church Street South will be deferred to a future Committee of Adjustments meeting. The next item on the agenda is, pardon me, application A2424 for 31 Searell Avenue. And this application was seeking a minor variance to permit uncovered steps leading to a below-grade entrance within the south interior side yard, with a minimum setback of 0.3 meters from the south interior side lot line. I understand from town staff that this application is also seeking a deferral to a future meeting to be determined. Is there any discussion from committee members in regards to the deferral? Okay, then I'll look for somebody to put forth the motion, please. Bernadette?
I move that we defer application A24-24 to a future date to be determined.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a seconder on that? Ken?
I second the motion.
Okay, amazing, thank you. And any discussion on the deferral motion? Seeing none, then I'll look for a vote. And the vote for deferral has been carried unanimously. So application A2424 for 31 Searell Avenue has been deferred to a future Committee of Adjustments meeting. So then I will now proceed to the sixth item on our agenda, which is other business. And I believe we have some guest speakers talking to us about the zoning, our future comprehensive zoning bylaw review. And I believe there's a presentation as well.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can, absolutely. Good evening, Sean. How are you?
Good, thank you. Great to see everyone this evening. I'm just going to ask for if Sandra, if you would be able to share the presentation.
Yeah, I think our staff here is just enabling that now. Just bear with us. Okay, Sandra, you should be able to see something on your screen that should now allow you to share. Okay, we see your presentation. Shift F5 if you're looking to put it in projection mode. You can tell I have a day job. Or on the top banner where you see slideshow. If you go down that, I think you should be able to move to a presentation mode. I think alternatively, I think on the bottom right, I think there's a projection mode as well. Sandra, do you want to just try Shift while pressing Shift down F5 on your computer? Right on the, yeah, that's
Sandra, you can go to slideshow.
Sean, do you have a copy of it as well? Do you want to maybe share it on your side?
Yeah, I can try sharing it.
Okay. So Sandra, are you okay to maybe just unshare, and technical staff, if we can just allow sharing capability to Sean, please?
Can everyone see that?
Yeah, we still see the notes view though, with the notes at the bottom. I'm assuming you probably want to be in full presentation mode. Try Shift F5.
Yeah. Just give me a minute. I just want to swap screens then. You're seeing the notes screen still?
Yeah.
How about that?
No, we still do. So you see at the bottom, actually you have it pressed, eh? On the bottom right where you can zoom in, right at the bottom right side where you can see the zoom in plus minus, right beside it there's a projector mode. It looks like it's grayed out, but can you see if you can try clicking that? I know, broke something. Yeah. Do you guys have a copy of the presentation, staff?
How's this?
Do we need to enable Sean to share again? He's going to try it again. It's on? Okay. Sean, try sharing, Sean. Let's see. Are you seeing anything in terms of options to share?
Just going to duplicate the slideshow and then I should be able to click through.
Okay.
How's that?
Don't see anything yet. Can we disable and then re-enable, Sean? Just to see if it resets? Okay, yeah, we see you, but again with notes. I'm okay with notes if everybody else is. If you can just zoom in, perhaps. I think our screen is big enough to be able to see it, even with the notes, and the notes will just kind of go to the bottom. Can you zoom in a little bit with that plus sign at the bottom right?
I'm just going to try this.
Oh, there we go.
Does that work?
Okay, don't touch anything else.
Okay.
Okay, there
Yeah,
we go.
no, I'm just going to have to wing it. I don't have the notes, so it's all right. Sandra's going to give most of the presentation, but if everyone's okay, we can get started. I apologize for that. My name's Sean McCullough. I'm the supervisor of planning policy and research here at the town of Ajax, and with me I'm joined by with Sandra McElhenney. She's one of our senior planners. She'll be giving the bulk of the presentation this evening, but we're really excited to be here tonight to share with you the an overview of the comprehensive review of the zoning bylaw. So just a quick background on this project. Now, this is something that's been going on for quite some time now. We started this project in March of 2015. And at that time, we branded the project Zoning Our Future. So we have hired WSP, a consultant, to assist us with a couple aspects of the project. Now, when we started the project in 2015, we did hit a series of challenges over the years, and for a portion of that time, the project was put on hold briefly. But we've really prioritized this project moving forward, and it's really been almost the entire thing that my team's been working on over the last year and a half or so. So we're moving along. So just quickly background again, back in 2015, we released phase 1 of the project. And at that time, there was a series of 8 discussion papers that was released. They were theme-based discussion papers to get people thinking about different topics in the bylaw, potential issues, and present items to generate feedback. In June of this year, we actually released, we finished phase 2 of this project, and we released a series of technical reports, which Sandra will go over this evening and provide some background on what some of the changes proposed in the bylaw are. We've also released a draft of the bylaw that outlines all of the proposed changes and track changes. And we're really here this evening to give you an overview of the changes. This will be a high-level overview, but I'm happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. We also encourage you to visit the project page, which Sandra will present in a minute, where you can actually submit your feedback. I know this committee's really involved in a lot of the everything zoning, and you see a lot of the variances that come through, so your feedback is really valuable to us. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sandra. And if you like, I can jump through each of the slides for you, Sandra.
That'd be great. Finishing, as Sean mentioned, phase 2, we're getting close to the end, which it actually began with a series of 8 technical reports and a draft zoning bylaw amendment. And these were introduced to council on June 17th. So the reports align logically with the themes that we introduced in phase 1, and they discuss issues. They provide an assessment of the available options and any recommended changes. And here are the topics: strong neighborhoods, transportation requirements, intensification areas, employment areas, Greenland system, Pickering Village, sustainability, and finally a catch-all report called General Review and Housekeeping. There is, as Sean mentioned, a draft zoning bylaw amendment, and this is in track changes format, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. Change slide. So our first report is strong neighborhoods, and this was formerly called stable neighborhoods as part of phase 1. Really the biggest change, and we've touched on it tonight in one of the presentations, is the permission council's direction when it comes to additional dwelling units. And in this case, council saw to permit up to 4 dwelling units on all properties with a detached, semi-detached, or a townhouse dwelling. 1 unit is permitted in an accessory building, and parking rates are proposed to be reduced to a minimum of 1 space per unit. Other standards are proposed to be updated as well, and these include reduced setbacks to below-grade entrances, and it's worth noting that a minor official plan amendment will also be required to enable these. We are also proposing to divide the CR zone, country residential zone, into 2 categories, which really primarily reflects the smaller lots on Toro Boulevard. Next slide. So there's some changes proposed to align terminology with provincial legislation, and this includes long-term care facility and retirement homes. Staff have also recommended changes to permissions and standards for accessory buildings and structures, platforms and balconies, as well as home-based businesses. And there is also an updated encroachment section. This will more easily permit items such as accessibility ramps, air conditioning units, and other ornamental features to be included. Next slide, please. So the transportation report looks at a reduction in parking rates in some instances, especially in the town's intensification areas. So for non-residential uses, formulae will be built into the bylaw to recognize the sharing of parking, which will help to utilize parking spaces more efficiently. There will also be a new blended parking rates for certain uses. We are also proposing to introduce minimum bike parking requirements for both the short and long-term bike parking spaces. TDM, or Transportation Demand Management options, will be integrated into the amended bylaw, and this would allow developments to actually reduce some parking when providing things like a carpool parking space or car share spaces. And finally, on transportation, various standards are also proposed to be updated, such as minimum drive aisle widths and drive-through queuing spaces. Next slide, please. It's in the downtown central area, or DCA, and the uptown center zones to expand permitted residential and non-residential uses, and minor updates to some of the zone standards. In addition, a holding provision in downtown Ajax is proposed to require an air quality study for development that exceeds 4 stories. This simply implements our current practices, but by making it more transparent. We are also proposing to introduce 2 new zones, the Midtown Corridor Zone and the GO Station Mixed Use Zone. These zones will provide as-of-right zoning permissions in most of these areas, with a few exceptions. There will also be a holding provision in the GO Station area to ensure that minimum jobs are provided and that land use compatibility is considered. And finally, we are proposing to introduce 2 new subsections. The pedestrian street classification will apply zone standards related to setbacks and built frontage, and minimum ground level transparency to provide a consistent built frontage and to promote street vibrancy. And new urban design standards will also apply to mid-rise and tall buildings to implement OP policies, such as the maximum floor plate sizes and tower separation requirements. Next slide, please. Turning to employment areas, this report includes proposed changes to remove funeral homes and public storage facilities as permitted uses in the PE zone. New uses are proposed, such as controlled environment agriculture facility, cannabis production facility, convention center, and the balance of the list here, you can read through those. The heavy employment zone is proposed to be changed to general employment zone to align with the official plan. And finally, various minor updates to the zone standards are planned, including new motor vehicle outdoor display requirements for car dealerships. Next slide, please. The Pickering Village zones are actually proposed to be shifted to their own section in the new bylaw. A new definition for small-scale mixed-use dwelling has also been introduced, as shown in the diagram here. Expanding the permitted uses in the VC3 zone to permit uses such as restaurants and daycare facilities, with the goal of creating more vibrant village life. And finally, minor updates are proposed to some of the zone standards related to landscape buffers and setbacks, among other items. Next slide, please. The Greenland System Technical Report outlines proposals for minor amendments to the agricultural operation definition, and it also introduces new definitions for agricultural related use and on-farm diversified use. On-farm diversified uses would effectively permit farms to have small value-added businesses similar to the antique example shown in the slide. To implement to vacant properties containing or near environmental features, to acquire an environmental impact study in certain instances. I just wanted to note that the image has not here, but I just wondered if I could just continue, and then if we pick it up, or would, through you, Chair.
Yeah, we got it back now,
We
Senator.
got it back. Okay, cool. I just had one last point on Greenland's. There we go. So thank you. A new erosion hazard zone is proposed along Ontoro Boulevard to align with CLOCA's erosion hazard limit boundary along Lake Ontario. And finally, a number of changes are proposed to the environmental protection zone mapping, where land is owned by public authorities, such as the town, and has received has recently had an EIS or environmental impact study completed. Next slide, thank you. The sustainability technical report does not include a great many changes, as most items discussed will continue to be addressed through the Ajax Green Standard. Some changes, however, do include new definitions and standards to promote community gardens and farmers markets, standards to promote stormwater infiltration, such as minimum landscape open space requirements, are also proposed in the new zoning bylaw. And new definitions for hard and landscaping, as well as green roofs, are introduced, while updating standards to actually promote green roofs. And finally, updating standards to the encroachment section to more easily allow for shade structures for cooling. Next slide, please. The final technical report captures new and amended definitions not discussed elsewhere in the other reports. A new mapping set is also proposed that will be cleaner and easier to read. It actually consolidates the two sets of maps that currently exist. And finally, this report discusses how various council motions are being addressed through the proposed amendments, including payday loan establishments and introducing new definitions and separation setbacks for the use, short-term rentals, updating the definition for a bed and breakfast establishment. On the topic of vertical farming, it introduces new definitions for indoor climate-controlled agriculture, and finally, updated permitted uses in the town's employment areas. And this would include removing public storage facilities as a permitted use in the prestige employment zone. Next slide, please. So the draft zoning bylaw shows all of the proposed amendments in a track changes format, and this is available on our project page, which I'll touch on shortly. The draft itself was released at the same time as the technical reports, and the goal really was to reduce the overall project timeline. Amendments to the draft will be made after the consultation process ends, but prior to sending it to council for final approval. In terms of the consultation work to date, I'd like to give a brief update on that process. It actually commenced following the presentation of the technical reports and the draft zoning bylaw to council in June. So of course we have our project IMO page, and this provides all of the background, current documents, as well as a list of the open house events. And these actually included 3, 2 of which have taken place, and 1 in-person virtual open house. One remaining in-person event, I'd like to note, will be held on September 11th at the McLean Community Center. And for if you want to view the virtual one, it's also posted on the project webpage. So in terms of other events, staff attended Trailfest back in June and have been reaching out to the public at a number of Thursday afternoon markets at the Ajax Community Center throughout the summer. And we continue to work towards our September 16th deadline for comments. And finally, members of the public, stakeholders can attend a statutory public meeting, and this is tentatively set for October 7th at Community Affairs and Planning Committee here at Town Hall. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight an additional public-facing feature, which is also on the project's page. We'd like to highlight the online map viewer. So just briefly, you can click on a property in Ajax, a pop-up box will appear, and with the current and proposed changes, if there are any. So clicking on the zone itself will bring you to a permitted uses table in either the current or the proposed bylaw to see what is allowed in that zone. And the public and others can make comments directly on this viewer as well. So I encourage all of the committee members tonight to visit the project webpage, and you can submit those comments through that portal or through our email. And this concludes the formal part of our presentation, Chair and committee, and I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Sean. I'll open it up to committee to see if they have any initial reaction. Ken?
My initial reaction is that I understand through the media that there was another provincial policy statement that's shorter, and I just wondered, with all of your work that's been going on since 2015, which version of the provincial policy statement have you got included in the comprehensive zoning review? And is there any work that's going to be done that will review the impact as to what the upcoming changes could be? Because it sounded like the province may be moving at somewhat of a different pace. So I'm not that familiar aside from what I read in the media, but if you have more information, I'd be happy to hear it. Thanks.
Sandra or Sean?
Chair, there was a bit of an audio blip in the midst of the member's question. And it's interesting in terms of timing, we at a staff meeting today had a discussion, and actually Sean gave a brief overview of the changes to the PPS. To your point, through you, Chair, it is a compressed document from what it was previously. And I wondered if I could either table that question, as I don't have notes on the new provincial policy statement, which will go into effect, I believe it's October 20th. But it is quite a more streamlined document, and pertaining to the zoning bylaw changes, it is always a challenge keeping up with provincial legislation and changes. So whatever impacts that policy document has on this, we're still working in real time to keep up with those. Sean might have something to add to that reflection.
Apologies, everybody. My internet just kicked out, but I heard bits and pieces of the question. I believe the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is what impacts will the new provincial planning statement have on this work from the on the zoning bylaw review? Do I have that correct?
Actually, I was just trying to figure out what version of the provincial policy statement your documents were reflecting, not the new changes. You know, you can't crystal ball it, but I think it's been a bit of a rolling matter. So I was just trying, like, is it a provincial policy statement that was in effect in 2015 or 2019? I'm not that familiar with the age of some of the policy statements.
Yeah, and a lot of the work that we do is constantly evolving, and we're updating documents as we go through. So this project was intended to bring our zoning bylaw into alignment with our current official plan, which came into effect at the end of 2014. This provincial government has made a number of changes that we've been working towards. So there are other changes too that we are expecting. It's the new regional official plan we're expecting any day now. So we will continue to update our official plan next. So we will, with the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, we move forward and we'll evaluate what impacts the new provincial planning statement have, if any. But really a lot of that will be reflected in the new official plan when we get into that project, which we plan to start this year.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
I wanted to specifically look at the section that was dealing with Pickering Village. And what I find is there's a lot of variation as to what the boundary of Pickering Village could be. the neighbors in my part of the subdivision, north of the church, Forest Brook Church, consider that we're part of Pickering Village. But I actually don't know what boundary that policy area includes, because there's lands that are south of Kingston Road, east of Church Street, that they claim is also Pickering Village. So I was wondering if there was something that actually said, so here's what the Pickering Village policy area covers. Hopefully, I don't know if it goes all the way to Riverside Golf Course and all the way down to the railway tracks or not.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so it's a good question. I won't step in and let different residents say what is called the village, but in terms of zoning in the official plan, we do have boundaries that are drawn, but that is for the policy reasons. So if they want to call themselves in the village, I have no issues with that. But there is zoning boundaries. It's really where it's what zones we have. 4 village zones. They generally extend from the Duffins in the west over to approximately, would that be Rotherglen, in between Rotherglen and Westney, over in that area.
Okay.
So there's a zone that runs along Kingston Road. And then it's kind of an odd shape. There's some zones that run down south, down Church Street. But it certainly doesn't go as far north as Riverside. There's a lot of residential zones that are north of the village, and a lot of those areas would probably be more likely the ones that you're referring to.
It'd be fair to say, though, Sandra, in your presentation, you pointed out that you're going to be, or part of the review is going to be redesignating some of that, the Pickering Village current designations. So will there be more clarity as a result of that as well, but that will be provided to the public? Because, you know, whenever you redesignate something, I would assume that you're then pronouncing as to what is, right?
So through the chair, or to you, Mr. Chair, it's actually just segregating out the current sections. So right now, those village zone categories, they're grouped together with our commercial and mixed use zones. So this is actually creating just a new section in the bylaw that's reflective of the current section. There are some minor changes that are proposed, but it's just creating its own. So we're not actually changing any of the zone boundaries. There may be updates to certain uses. There may be small updates to some of the standards, but we're not actually rezoning any of the properties in Pickering Village.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Sorry, just before I go back to you, Laura, did you have one too? Just keep going? Okay. All right. Yeah.
I wondered if there was any of the policy backgrounders or notes that actually talk about the rationale for the changes in parking. I find that the reduction of the parking standards is probably the most troubling for me personally. It's something that we deal with at the committee. And I think that the one thing that's happening is I'm either missing what the rationale is to here's why we've decided to reduce it. And I was also looking, I don't see anything that was specifically dealing with accessible parking and the provision of accessible parking, which is something that's become near and dear to my heart. And I think that I either need more explanation or a chance to understand why the direction of parking standards is going counterclockwise to what I was anticipating it was doing. I'm seeing more and more people that are parking we have now accessory development units developed in our neighborhood and in an area that for more than 20 years we had no parking issues. And now we have it directly across the street from us, let alone in the rest of the community. So I was curious as to, is there a section that deals with the change in parking standards, the rationale for why, and the impacts of it? Because I'm not understanding what's going on. And that's that's one part of it. So, but thank you.
Parking is a
Well,
sore
thank you.
spot
So
for
the-
this committee, just if you can't tell. Sorry, Sean. go
Thank
ahead.
you. That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Member Elliott. It's a great question. So maybe I'll start with the easy one, the accessible parking spaces. So that's all comes from in that act. So we comply with what the provincial requirements are. So rather than
Sorry, Sean, can you just repeat the act? We had an audio snafu there. Just what act was that it
Yep.
was combined with?
It's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AODA.
Okay, AOD.
Might be
Okay.
missing that right now. I know Sarah's on here. She's gonna probably send me an email in the morning. So in terms of the parking changes, we've released the transportation requirements technical report. So that is one of the reports that our consultant helped us with. They've taken a look at a lot of the parking rates in other jurisdictions to really see what best practices are. Ajax is in kind of a transition, I will say. As we start to see a lot more new residential units, they are typically with the 4 units. And the idea is over time there would be more transit options. Really, in terms of the parking rates being reduced, so there are the biggest changes coming in the intensification areas, and I know this committee's dealt with a number of applications over the years in intensification areas, and really the idea is in those areas that they will transition to walkable and transit supportive communities. So that is the biggest change in the parking rates being reduced from approximately 1.5 spaces or 1.25 in intensification down to 0.85 spaces per unit plus 0.25 spaces for visitor parking. In terms of the non-residential uses, we're generally, most of those are actually staying the same. The biggest change is actually the rate for warehouses is actually increasing. That's one of probably the exceptions. But we have received comments on that, that we are going to be taking another look at that one to see if that's an appropriate change. I think that answers the question, and I'd be open to hearing if there's any further clarification required.
Okay.
Sean, would you mind if I added a footnote?
Yeah, absolutely.
Through you, Chair. And it's interesting, I think, and worth noting that they thought that our parking rates were too high. So I appreciate the members' comment, and it's good context for trying to find that right balance for Ajax, and to your point, Sean, about the growing pains that the town may be experiencing as transit is rapid but not rapid enough, and all the other changes in larger buildings. So it was just the number they would like to get rid of minimums. I mean, these are the kind of sentences. So I just wanted to add that in terms of other feedback, but I certainly appreciate the challenges when parking is not working in a neighborhood, and including yours through the member commenter. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry. Lori, you had a question for clarity.
I was just wondering, you cut out just very briefly at the beginning of your commentary there, and you were saying that someone thought our parking rates were too high, and I was curious who that was.
Sorry, this was through you, Chair, the development industry representatives who we invited to hear a presentation, something to the almost exactly like this. And they were individual developers who are building, I don't know their names offhand, but the context of the conversation and those comments will be available too through our report coming to council. But anecdotally, that they would like to see, that looking at other jurisdictions that are even less. So it was in the context of a large scale building that the comment was made. Hopefully that clarifies your question.
Is it ever based on actual traffic studies? Like and not to discount what you just said, but, you know, I was kind of smirking because if I was a developer, wouldn't I want to encourage lower parking rates by saying, oh, yeah, you're too high, because this way I'm not on the hook to provide more parking spots.
Yeah, so through your chair. So that's correct. And you know, as the committee over the years, you've seen a lot of the results of those parking studies that have taken place over the years. So even when we're getting the results from our consultant who's looking at jurisdictions, they're looking at the zoning bylaws in other jurisdictions, what are required. They're also looking at some of their own statistics in terms of studies that they've done. And then even at the staff level, we do know that over the years, there have been a lot of studies that are coming forward rationalizing those reduced parking rates based on observed parking rates in some of these larger buildings and things. They actually go out and do parking counts on a lot of those sites. So from a staff perspective, we're generally supportive of the rates that are being proposed.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Lori.
Thank you very much. Great presentation. Really appreciate it. I do have a couple of questions, a couple of comments. In your report, on one of the pages, you mentioned that funeral homes and public storage was being removed from one of the areas, and was just curious why those two sectors.
Yep. So through the chair to Member Roberts. So that's a change that's being made to update our align the zoning bylaw with our official plan. So those are actually two uses that were added as prohibited uses in the prestige employment zone only. So it's being removed from the prestige employment zone. On the topic though of public storage facilities, there have been concerns raised by council that they
Seems to happen at the most
I
inopportune
know,
time.
right?
Right when, like, cliffhanger.
Yeah.
I can also pick up that
Oh, please
thread.
do. Please
We'll
do.
see if Sean can rejoin us. The direction from council, which is part of the general housekeeping report on the topic of public storage facilities, came because of the low jobs that these types of businesses generate. And it was felt too that there are units, commercial use, public storage facilities already in place in the town. And so the impetus to not allow those in the prestige employment zone was really to reflect the need for the types of businesses in that PE zone that really did drive more job creation. So really that was the underpinning that.
Okay, that's a great, I do like that one. Another one you had mentioned that I believe it was in Pickering Village, that craft beverage establishments, they have to be attached to a restaurant. Is that, did I understand that correctly? So they've got to be the same company?
To the question that froze, Sean, we just had a subsequent question. I did answer Member Roberts's question about the prestige, about public storage facility. Thank you for your patience. I was freezing too. But her subsequent question was about the craft beverage establishment. Go ahead. Sorry, through you, Chair. Would you like to repeat the question?
I was just looking for clarification that a craft beverage establishment has to be associated with a restaurant as well, or a
Specifically for Pickering Village.
yes, specifically for Pickering Village.
Yeah, so through the chair to Member Roberts. So in Pickering Village and some of our other mixed use zones, it would have to be associated with a restaurant. But in other employment areas, it could be permitted as more of a manufacturing, more of your typical type of brewery or those types of facilities that you'd be more familiar with. And that's just to align with kind of the permissions of the official plan in terms of where some of those uses are permitted.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. You did make mention to short-term rentals, and just want kind of offer my unsolicited opinion on that one. I do look at Ajax. I don't think we're a big tourist town per se. So for me, I would say the short-term rentals takes away from regular rentals for, we have a housing crisis, and short-term rentals do take away from regular leases. So I'm not a huge fan of them. So just wanted to throw that one out there. And surprise, surprise, I did have a parking comment. I do take exception with the parking reduction in most instances. I think even in one of our applications tonight, one of the people made mention to people are parking on lawns, and I think almost everybody can attest to on their streets, people are parking in ways that we have never seen parking before. It is causing dangerous situations for families and cars driving up and down streets. So I think although there are some reports that are saying it works, I really argue to the contrary. I don't think it's working. And I would specifically ask the town to take consideration to visitor parking rates. Visitor parking rates really cause a huge problem, especially in condominiums. And I would also say that selling properties that do not have resale of residential properties that don't have adequate parking is very difficult and really impacts on the value of those properties. So I think that should be taken into consideration as well. And I'll end on a high note. Love the online mapping tool that will show the current zoning. I think that's fantastic. And thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you, Lori. Sorry, Bernadette. I'll come back to you, Ken. I see you. Go for it. Yeah? Yep.
Lori stole most of my comments, but I also echo Lori's comments about the online mapping tool. I think that's fantastic that individuals can go online and see, you know, what's impacted in their particular neighborhoods. It's a great tool. I too have some reservations about the parking. I think we have to take stock in what our residents are saying and their experiences, and so I would encourage you to factor that those comments into consideration as you move forward, and just, you know, keep that in the back of your minds. Given that we are hearing a consistent message from the residents of Ajax that parking is a concern, I can understand and appreciate that perhaps, you know, at times we say, well, that's a bylaw issue, take it up with parking, file a complaint. But if the resonating comments are consistent amongst the majority of residents, I think it's a bigger problem and a bigger discussion that needs to be had as we move forward with any comprehensive zoning bylaw changes. Finally, there was a comment made, I think Sandra, you made this comment and also made mention in your presentation about the prestige employment area. And I'm hoping that you can educate me with, in terms of the criteria of what is actually designated as a prestigious, you know, employment area. What were the factors that were considered when making those decisions? Or will be made, a decision is being made to be factored into an prestigious employment area?
Yeah, so I can take that question, Mr. Chair, to the member. So the current zoning bylaw has a number of prestige employment zones already identified, and that's reflective of our official plan. Residential areas, we have our mixed use areas, and then we have a larger category that is our employment areas. In the employment areas, we have two land use designations in the official plan. Prestige employment is generally those that have more, have higher visibility on major arterial roads or Highway 401. So anything that you go up Salem Road, along Bailey, in between the downtown, the GO station, a lot of those areas are going to be your prestige employment. And the standards associated with those are much higher than the general employment. So for example, outdoor storage would not be permitted in a prestige employment zone, whereas it would be permitted in a general employment zone. And those general employment zones are generally more in the heart of the industrial areas. So if you think of things like in the middle of Finley Avenue, kind of in the middle of that south employment area, that would be the general employment. So that's kind of the difference. So just for clarification, we're not actually rezoning any of those lands through this process. There are Same with some updates to some of the permitted uses for those zones, but we're actually not rezoning a lot of those, any of those properties.
Okay, I help. Okay. Ken?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. When we're approving applications as a committee, we have a number of tests that we have to follow. And one of the tests is compliance with the official plan and the intent of the zoning bylaw. I'm just getting a sense now that if the zoning bylaw is changing in terms of the standards, it's the time frame. Like, are we talking about approving an application that's that's consistent with the intent of the proposed bylaw or the existing bylaw? And I was also wondering if there is some way that when this bylaw finally sees the light of day at the end of your stage 3, if there was some kind of a lasso that covers off the things that would be part of the strong mayor powers, where it's like you feel like this is the application that we're approving, and then we find out the result is different. And I understand there is discretion, but what I was looking at it is, for our committee, we're to say that it's consistent with the intent of the zoning bylaw and the official plan. So is it the current one? And how do we move forward from this position? As of the middle of October, is it compliant with the intent of the proposed zoning bylaw or not? Sorry, you guys flashed. You may not have heard that. So
I heard most of it, so I'll maybe get you to jump in if I miss anything. So through you, Mr. Chair, to the member. So you're going to be making your decisions on the current zoning bylaw. The staff will do the staff report will identify, what bylaw you're making a recommendation on. If there is a point in which you may be hearing applications that may be considered under different bylaws, because an application is considered under the policy framework that's in place, the date that someone submits. And then as part of this process too, we're also looking at transition rules between the old bylaw and the new bylaw. So that's something that we're still working with our legal team on to see what the options are in terms of how that works out. But it will be abundantly clear in the staff report if we need to make sure that you understand what which bylaw you're considering. In terms of the other question, I may have missed some of the mayor's directive piece. I was unclear on what the question was in relation to that item.
I guess my part of it is having some certainty of, we have to say that something is consistent with the official plan and the zoning bylaw. Will those ground rules apply beyond our committee? Or is that, just the committee of adjustment? I'm just looking at seeing an application that we saw in one form that has transformed significantly. And
yes,
I was just curious because it just struck me that the application that came forward was tolerable, but it became less tolerable. And I still am going to be living in the community for a while. So it's like I want to be proud of the community that I'm in and where I live, and have a sense that I have some idea of certainty as to the community that is existing and what's being created.
Go through the chair to the member. So the Committee of Adjustments powers are derived from two sources, from the Planning Act, which is where those 4 tests come from. And then it's also given by council to the committee members. So your authority will remain with what is identified in the Planning Act. And then council has the ultimate decision-making power in terms of our proposed bylaw that will be coming forward and any other changes to any of our other planning documents, provided that they comply and conform and are consistent with the other planning documents above them, whether it's at the regional or provincial levels. So I think that answers the question.
Yep.
Good, good. Yep.
Just one last, it's not a question, it's a comment. I am hoping that at the time that you're looking for, your consultant or others are looking for comparables, I hope they're not looking to the standards that are being imposed within some place like the City of Toronto and saying, well, if Toronto did it, this is what Ajax should be doing. I'm hoping that there is a sense that we would look to comparable municipalities to the nature and character of the community that exists now and go further out than just going to, oh, well, this is what the big guys are doing. I have a sense that if we were aligning ourselves to what more of what Pickering, Ajax, and Oshawa were doing, or even the more moderate-sized municipalities, 90,000 to 150 or 200,000 communities elsewhere in the GTA or Southern Ontario, that it would be a better comparison to where we should be going with some of these standards. And I'm glad I don't have to do this planning work anymore. It was many years.
So through the chair, if I can touch on that comment, because I think it is a good comment, and that's something that's top of mind with any project that we do. So we do often look to Toronto just because a lot of times they are kind of at the leading edge, or they may be doing things that others are not. But a lot of the times when we are completing these types of projects, our first look is we do collect information from our neighboring municipalities. And then we also do try to get similar information from other suburban municipalities that are of similar size and kind of spread out across the GTHA, whether it be a Guelph or a Markham or an Oakville or Burlington, and we try to get a range of options. Offhand, I can't recall which were utilized in the transportation study, but that's generally the process that we use when we're doing a lot of this work, is looking at a range of municipalities to see what others are doing.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to maybe close it off there, if that's okay. Sean, Sandra, thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule to kind of walk us through. I know there's if I remember the dates right, I think there's the session on the 11th, and then the online that's available as well. So until the 16th, I think it was. Thank you again for coming in and walking us through, I think, the major highlights and answering some very key questions on it. And whatever you can do for parking, it'll be extra help, I think, for this committee. So thank you again, and have a good evening. Did you guys have anything else to add in closing, or are we good here?
No, I'll just add and close. Just we really encourage you to participate in the final open house, or review the information on the IMO page that Sandra shared. Again, your comments are appreciated, and we'll take all the help we can get reviewing the information. So appreciate the time this evening, and thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye. All right. Was there any other business? Okay. No. Okay. All right. Then I would like to look for a motion to adjourn this meeting at 8:45. Bernadette, see you first.
I move that we adjourn this evening's meeting.
Okay. Tomas is the seconder.
I second the motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. And any discussion on the motion? If not, then we'll look for a vote. Okay, and the motion has been carried, so we will adjourn this meeting at 8:46. Thank you.